Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, and things adjacent. And today I wanted to bring you an article that one of my viewers posted in the comment section. A few other people have become aware of this extensive article. There's just no way I'm going to read the whole thing. It is super long, and I think I've given up on the whole reading, a really entire, a book or small mini book in my videos over the course of a couple days. Mainly people don't have the attention spans for that, and you can just read the article yourself. But what I wanted to do was read the introduction and kind of just read into it and let you know where this article is going. But it is tackling a very pertinent problem, and the question about how bad is climate change and what is the existential threat. And this article attempts to put that into more of a focused light, and it's titled "What Lies Beneath." This is by David Spratt and Ian Dunlop, forward by Hans Joachim Schellnhuber. Excuse me. And so this is the understatement of existential climate risk. This is what this is about. Very extensive article and really well done. And I'm going to start with a forward by Hans Joachim Schellnhuber. What Lies Beneath is an important report. It does not deliver new facts and figures, but instead provides a new perspective on the existential risks associated with anthropogenic, I'll say that again, anthropogenic global warming. It is the critical overview of well-informed intellectuals who sit outside the climate science community, which has developed over the last 50 years. All such expert communities are prone to what the French called deformation professionnelle and the German, I'm just going to blow this, Betriebblindheit. Don't know if I got that right or not. Expressed in plain English, experts tend to establish a peer worldview which becomes ever more rigid and focused. Yet the crucial insights regarding the issue in question may lurk at the fringes. Sound familiar? Let me see if I can straighten my microphone out. Maybe not. This is particularly true when the issue is the very survival of our civilization, where conventional means of analysis may become useless. This dilemma, notwithstanding, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change bravely perseveres with its attempt to assess the multiple cause and effect relationships which comprise the climate problem. Excuse me. After delivering 5 fully fledged assessment reports, it is hardly surprising that a trend towards erring on the side of least drama has emerged. There are reasons, many reasons, both subtle and mundane. Let me highlight just one of each. Firstly, the IPCC is stricken with the probability obsession. Ever since statistics was established in the 16th century, scientists have tried to capture the complex stochastic behavior of a given non-trivial object, such as a roulette wheel, by repeating the same experiment on that object many, many times. If there was a set of well-defined outcomes, such as the ball ending on the red or black of the wheel, then the probability of a specific outcome was simply the number of experiments delivering that outcome divided by the total number of experiments. This sounds reasonable, but can we even imagine applying that approach to global warming? Strictly speaking, we have to redo the Industrial Revolution. We would have to redo the Industrial Revolution and the greenhouse gas emissions it triggered 1,000 times or so, always starting with the Earth system in its 1950 pre-industrial state. Then calculate the averaged observed outcome of that planetary experiment in terms of mean surface temperature rise, global biological productivity, total number of climate refugees, and many other variables. This is a nonsensical notion. Of course, climate scientists are not trying to treat the Earth like a roulette wheel, though humans might be. Yet the statistical approach keeps on creeping into the assessments. How many times did the thermohaline circulation collapse under comparable conditions in the planetary past? How often did the Pacific enter a permanent El Nino state in the Holocene? And so on. These are valuable questions that can generate precious scientific insights. But we must never forget that we are in a unique situation with no precise historic analog. The level of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is now greater and the Earth warmer than human beings have ever experienced, and there are almost 8 billion of us now living on this planet. So calculating probabilities makes little sense in the most critical instances, such as the methane release dynamics in thawing permafrost areas, or the potential failing of entire states in the climate crisis. Rather, we should identify possibilities, that is, potential developments in the planetary makeup that are consistent with the initial and boundary conditions, the processes, and the drivers we know. This is akin to scenario planning, now being proposed for assessing climate risks in the corporate sector, where the consequences of a number of future possibilities, including those which may seem highly unlikely but have major consequences, are evaluated. This way, one can oversee the probability obsession that not only fantasizes about the replicability of the singular, but also favors the familiar over the unknown and unexpected. As an extreme example, the fact that our world has never been destroyed previously would conventionally assign probability 0 to such an event, but this only holds true under steady-state assumptions, which are practically never warranted. Secondly, there is the devil's advocate reward in the magnificent tradition of the Enlightenment, which shattered so many myths of the ancient regimes. Scientists are trained to be skeptical about every proposition which cannot be directly verified by empirical evidence or derived from first principles, such as the invariability of the speed of light. So if researchers come up with an entirely new thought, experts tend to reflexively dismiss it as speculative, which is effectively a death warrant in the academic world, whereas those who criticize the idea will be applauded, rewarded, and promoted. This phenomenon is evident in every seminar, colloquium, or learned society assembly. In turn, this means that scientific progress is often driven from the periphery, or occasionally by eminent personalities whose seniority is beyond doubt. This does not at all imply that hypotheses need to be vindicated in due course, but out-of-the-box thinking is vital, given the unprecedented climate risks which now confront human civilization. In conclusion, one should not be overly critical of the IPCC, since the scientists involved are doing what scientists are expected to do to the very best of their ability in difficult circumstances. But climate change is now reaching the end game, where very soon humanity must choose between taking unprecedented action or accepting that it has been left too late and bear the consequences. Therefore, it is all the more important to listen to the non-mainstream voices who do understand the issues and are less hesitant to cry wolf. That's an important sentence right there. Unfortunately for us, the wolf may already be in the house. Cry wolf, yell fire. Many people have been doing exactly that and been, admonished, ostracized, called insane, called crazy. That's the end of the foreword. So this is a super long article. So I think I'm going to read this first little introduction page and link the rest below. You guys will get you can read the whole thing. This is very thorough, very extensive. 3 decades ago, when serious debate on human-induced climate change began at the global level, a great deal of statesmanship was on display. There was a preparedness to recognize that this was an issue transcending nation-states, ideologies, and political parties, which had to be addressed proactively in the long-term interests of humanity as a whole. This was the case even though the existential nature of the risk it posed was far less clear-cut than it is today. As global institutions such as the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which was established at the Rio Earth Summit in 1992, were developed to take up this challenge, and the extent of change this would demand of the fossil fuel-dominated world order became clearer, the forces of resistance began to mobilize. Did they mobilize? Today, as a consequence, and despite the diplomatic triumph of the 2015 Paris Agreement, the debate around climate change policy has never been more dysfunctional, indeed Orwellian. In his book 1984, George Orwell describes a doublethink totalitarian state where most of the population accepts the most flagrant violations of reality because they never fully grasped the enormity of what was demanded of them and were not sufficiently interested in public events to notice what was happening. By lack of understanding, they remained sane. Orwell could have been writing about climate change and policy making. International agreements talked of limiting global warming to 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius. But in reality, they set the world on a path of 3 to 5 degrees Celsius of warming. Goals are reaffirmed only to be abandoned. Coal is clean, quote unquote. Just 1°C of warming is already dangerous, but this cannot be admitted. The planetary future is hostage to myopic national self-interest. Action is delayed on the assumption that as yet unproven technologies will save the day decades hence. The risks are existential, but it is alarmist to say so. A 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 chance of missing a goal is normalized as reasonable. Moral hazard permeates official thinking, and that there is an incentive to ignore the risks in the interests of political expediency. Climate policy making for years has been cognitively dissonant, a flagrant violation of reality. So it is unsurprising that there is a lack of understanding amongst the public and elites of the full measure of the climate challenge. Yet most Australians sense where we are heading. 3/4 of Australians see climate change as catastrophic risk, and half see our way of life ending within the next 100 years. Politics and policymaking have norms, rules and practices, assumptions and boundaries that constrain and shape them. In recent years, the previous norms of statesmanship and long-term thinking have disappeared, replaced by an obsession with short-term political and commercial advantage. Climate policymaking is no exception. Since 1992, short-term economic interest has trumped environmental and future human needs. The world today emits 50% more carbon dioxide from the consumption of energy than it did 25 years ago. And the global economy has more than doubled in size. The UNFCCC strives to enable economic development to proceed in a sustainable manner, but every year humanity's ecological footprint becomes larger and less sustainable. Humanity now requires the biophysical capacity of 1.7 Earths annually as it rapidly chews up natural capital. A fast emergency scale transition to a post-fossil fuel world is absolutely necessary to address climate change. But this is excluded from consideration by policymakers because it is considered to be too disruptive. The orthodoxy is that there is a time for an orderly economic transition within the current short-term political paradigm. Discussion of what would be safe, less warming than we presently experience is non-existent. And so we have a policy failure of epic proportions. And that is all I'm going to read of this article. I hope that you all take the time to read through the rest of it. It is really, really well done and really sums up the fact that so many are misinformed about what actually would need to be done. And we are currently being misinformed. You know, we are in the process of being misinformed almost daily. Green New Deal and Extinction Rebellion and climate emergencies being declared notwithstanding, we are being misinformed every day about the realities of the world that we live in and the amount of change that would be necessary to actually make a dent. Again, we're talking about degrowing our economy. We're talking about nationalizing production of things that we don't need. Turning off not just the fossil fuel taps, but turning off the consumption taps. We need to really educate people around the fact that we're going to have to understand that we're either going to have to accept living in a much different world or accept living in a much different world. We're going to have changes forced upon us one way or the other. So it might be better to choose to be in the driver's seat and to be the ones to make the choice to live in a different world rather than have that world be thrust upon us. But we are quickly running out of time, and we might not even have time for that. And that is the reality. Unfortunately, it saddens me to say this, and it saddens me to think this on a daily basis. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time,